Series by the Committee for Perth. I'm Marion Fulker, I'm the CEO of the committee, and today's talk will focus on our latest research, which is, has the future of work arrived? And FactBase is a joint venture research project, a very long-term one with the University of Western Australia, and has resulted in more than 70 pieces of research. Our long-term contract researcher, Gemma Davis, is going to do today's presentation, which is a very short summary of what is quite a large bulletin, which you will see in soft copy tomorrow. And I think Gemma really sort of struggled to condense all of the trends, disruptions and economic shifts to really think about the future of work and put it into quite a succinct publication. This is the first in our Future of Work project, and we're really looking forward to sharing research with you every month between now and the end of the year. In opening today's event, can I acknowledge that we are at Committee for Perth meeting on Whadjuk country, part of the Noongar Nation, and pay our respects to Elders past and present, and also to any Aboriginal people on the call today.
Thanks, Marion. As Marion just outlined, this FactBase bulletin was prepared as the first piece of research in the Committee for Perth's new major project, and the project will examine the future of work in Australia, WA and Greater Perth. And this bulletin provides a high-level overview of the primary economic, global and technological trends influencing jobs in Australia and WA today. So if we move to the first slide. The first thing to remember when we talk about the future of work is that the term is primarily used to describe industry reform and impacts on jobs associated with the fourth industrial revolution. And the fourth industrial revolution was a term coined by Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum in about 2015. And it refers to fourth era technology impacting on industry, and these include digital, physical and biological technologies. One of the primary insights from the research into the fourth industrial revolution is that technology and workplace and workforce change is not new. There's been a constant continuum of change in jobs, workplaces and the workforce since the first industrial revolution in the 18th century. If we move to the next slide, this shows that over time, jobs and industries have been created and they've been destroyed as new technology generates new markets, jobs and production processes. Economist Joseph Schumpeter called this process creative destruction back in the 1930s. If we move to the next slide, what we do know is a large amount of attention has been given to the potential for creative destruction in the fourth industrial revolution. And a key reason for this is the breadth of technological change that's occurring over the last decade. And this has occurred across spheres of digital, physical and biological technology. So it includes things like artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, big data, cloud computing, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, genetic engineering and neurotechnology. This has the capacity to change the ways goods are produced, services are delivered and tasks are performed across a wide range of sectors. And importantly, it's not just low-skilled, low-paying jobs that researchers have identified as at risk of change, but it includes highly skilled, high-paying jobs across a wide range of sectors. And these include transport, data analysis, healthcare, legal and financial services, and environmental, mechanical and health monitoring. If we go to the next slide. Another key factor driving specific concern about disruption and displacement in the fourth industrial revolution is the speed of change. The research that I've looked at has really consistently identified an acceleration in innovation and technological change in the workforce over the past decade. And this is expected to accelerate processes whereby demand for people in the workforce to undertake routine and manual tasks declines, while demand for workers with human and non-routine skills increases. And these are skills associated with things like creativity and empathy. So this could lead to redundancy for some workers, while job vacancies are created that the existing labour force might not be qualified to fill. If we move to the next slide, there's a third factor also influencing concern about the fourth industrial revolution. And these are concurrent global megatrends, which are also acting as accelerants of change. We're talking here about things like globalization, demographic change such as aging, socio-economic change, climate change, labour force change, and of course the COVID-19 pandemic. They're changing the way they're changing labour supply, they're influencing demand for and supply of products and services, and therefore the allocation of labour. They're also changing the size, the skill and the makeup of the workforce. They're changing workforce demographics. They're changing contractual arrangements in the workforce, and they're changing the way workplaces operate, such as enabling or even requiring people to work from home. If we move to the next slide, as part of this research, I reviewed a large number of research reports, and a lot of these reports aim to estimate the impact of the fourth industrial revolution on jobs. And what these reports really revealed to me is that there's very limited consensus regarding the impacts that the fourth industrial revolution will have on jobs. In particular, estimates of the number of jobs that will face disruption or displacement ranged largely, and from under 10% to close to 60%. So this reflected not only differing methodologies and viewpoints of the authors, but also broad variations that are expected across industries, countries and regions. So a key insight of the research was that the impacts of the fourth industrial revolution on jobs is not expected to be homogeneous. If we move to the next slide, there was, however, more consensus regarding the types of industries where jobs are likely to be susceptible, particularly to displacement. And these were industries such as manufacturing, transport, sales and related, like retail and real estate industries, construction, and even agriculture and mining and resources. On the next slide, we can see that there was also broad consensus regarding industries considered least susceptible to change and to disruption. These included education, health, information and communication technology, business and financial services, and professional and scientific services. Just to clarify, jobs in many of these sectors are expected to grow in Australia, and that's due to technology and other global megatrends. This does not mean that jobs in these sectors are not susceptible to change, but they aren't as susceptible to job displacement because they're more reliant on human, cognitive and interpersonal skills, and also because they're growth industries. If we move to the next slide, the research also looks at impacts by country. And researchers indicate that the greatest impacts are currently being felt by countries that are at the polar ends of the technological spectrum. So countries at the frontier of technology are struggling to find appropriately skilled workers to create and operate new technologies. And at the same time, countries that have retained conventional industries and technologies continue to experience demand for low-skilled workers to undertake manual tasks, yet they potentially face the greatest disruption in the future. At the moment, Australia sits in the middle of this continuum. If we move on to the next slide, we can see that Australia's economy has been experiencing structural reform over a long period of time since the 1960s and 70s, and this is a shift in employment industries. The graph illustrates this change, showing that a continued decline has occurred in employment in non-service industry sectors, such as manufacturing and agriculture, while employment in service sectors such as healthcare and social assistance and professional, scientific and technological services has grown. If we move to the next slide, we can see the projections in Australia is for these trends to continue, with employment growth expected to be strongest in healthcare, professional services and education, and declining employment in manufacturing and agriculture. Jobs in information media, such as newspaper and TV journalism, are also expected to decline. Yet, if we move to the next slide, we can see that in WA alone, it's apparent that the shift to service sector employment has been less pronounced than Australia-wide. These graphs show that the rise in service sector employment and decline in non-service sector employment has been less pronounced in WA. And if we move to the next slide, comparing WA to other states, you can see that the West has recorded just 4.5% growth in service sector employment over the past 15 years, and that employment in sectors such as mining and construction has grown over this period, and that is strongly linked to investment in the mining sector. But if we look at New South Wales and Victoria in particular, you can see much stronger growth in service industries. Moving to the next slide, there is really strong evidence that this is linked to WA and Greater Perth's unique specialisation in mining. The table shows that locational quotients for key industry sectors in capital cities in Australia, and shows that mining is more important to Greater Perth than any other sector is to any other capital city. The next slide looks at employment projections and compares Greater Perth to employment projections in Australia. And you can see this unique specialisation again in these projections. They indicate an expectation that a higher proportion of employment growth in Greater Perth will be in mining than Australia-wide, and employment in the manufacturing sector in Greater Perth will grow also. Moving to the next slide, this evidence indicated that while WA and Greater Perth is experiencing a shift towards a service-oriented economy, the importance of the mining sector and growth in manufacturing, including advanced manufacturing, means that this is happening at a slower pace than elsewhere in Australia. And it's also reflected in Greater Perth's human capital profile. This graph shows that while Perth's workforce is skilled, the educational attainment of the labour force remains linked to the mining and non-service sector, with higher levels of certificate and diploma level qualifications and lower proportions of tertiary qualifications compared to other capitals such as Sydney and Melbourne. If we move to the next slide, what we know and what the research indicates, however, is that these industries are shifting towards advanced production models. And this process has been rapid over the past 5 to 10 years and is changing the types of jobs available in these industries and the skills needed. Key examples include the automation of vehicles and drilling on mine sites, which has displaced some jobs, but it's also created new jobs in mining and other sectors like science, technology and engineering. If we move to the next slide. So the evidence really shows that the adoption of new technology is delivering benefits and challenges. Benefits include improved health and safety, productivity and efficiency gains, as well as the creation of new high quality jobs. And this really could assist in establishing Perth and WA as a knowledge centre for the mining and resource sector globally. But the challenge could be a mismatch in the skills available in the labour force and the skills required by industry, and this could be exacerbated in regional areas. Other challenges include the need to retrain workers, heightened risk of long-term unemployment for some workers as their skills become redundant, and increased risk of wage polarisation and heightened inequality in the community. If we move to the next slide, on top of all these concerns, we've got the issue of the COVID-19 pandemic. And there has been discussion in the media and among industry as to whether COVID-19 pandemic and the associated recession will be likely to accelerate future work changes. For example, research suggests that the adoption of new technology is accelerated during periods of recession as industries seek to increase efficiencies. There's also speculation that structural change will be accelerated by shifts in consumer behaviour, such as a trend towards online shopping. But to date, I really found that there's limited data available about this, and the long-term trends remain unknown. But what is apparent is that there are changes occurring to work, production, process, demand and supply change occurring as a result of COVID-19. There's also been an increase in unemployment and a reduction in hours worked. Therefore, furthermore, the way people work has rapidly changed, and there's a shift towards working from home and an uptake of video conferencing and online services. If we move to the next slide, It's also apparent, next slide please, that some of the industries that are predicted to be impacted by the fourth industrial revolution are also being significantly impacted by the pandemic. And these include sectors such as hospitality and retail. But they're not all the same sectors. And I think we're currently seeing impacts in sectors such as education, which has been a projected growth sector, but is currently facing many significant challenges as a result of the pandemic. But the extent to which these impacts will have a medium to long-term influence on work and the structure of the economy remains unknown. And we'll look at this as the project progresses. And it will really largely rely on the time taken to return to a business as usual environment, which, as we all know, also remains unknown. So to wrap up, I think the research really shows that the future of work changes today are part of an ongoing continuum of work change that has been occurring for centuries. As jobs are disrupted or displaced by technology, global and domestic trends, other jobs are created. And these are most often in the service sector, but also include non-routine jobs in the non-service sector. These trends have been apparent in Australia and in WA for decades. However, they've not been as significant in WA due to its unique specialisation in mining and growth in the sector that has occurred over the past 2 decades in particular. Despite this, we know that technological advancements are impacting on jobs in the mining and manufacturing sector today and in the future. And this could make people and industries in WA more susceptible to the negative impacts of technological change. But if well managed, it could also provide new and better jobs for WA workers and position Perth at the technological frontiers of these sectors worldwide. So moving to the next slide. In conclusion, this is the first bulletin prepared as part of the Future of Work project, and there is a lot more detail in the bulletin than I was able to provide today. But there will be an additional 3 bulletins that are due to be completed over the coming months, and some of those, such as a current bulletin I'm preparing on job growth and losses, will look at some of these trends in WA and the impact on jobs in more detail. The Committee for Perth is also going to commence extensive engagement with the community and industry to look at trends in WA and Perth in greater detail, and there'll be plenty of opportunities for people to have their say before the major report is released in 2021.